all the students are starting entrepreneurs, and they joined Global School because we are offering them the opportunity to start their own business as well as get a bachelor degree. So a specific bunch, so they have a real interest in the topics that you'll be sharing. We already have the first question coming in. So that to me is a signal, shut up, let's listen to Toby. Toby, thanks for coming in. Jurgen, again, big hand. And then thank you on behalf of all of us for organizing this. So thanks so much, Toby. Please share your background story a little bit. We're accustomed now that it's about a 15-20 minute presentation and then a lot of interaction with questions. I will gather the questions from the chat and I will try to moderate. And then we'll have a great session. Thanks for joining again, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. Appreciate, excited to be with you guys here this morning or this evening or this afternoon, wherever it happens to be where you're at. So Toby Rush, I am from Kansas, which is right in the middle of the United States. I grew up on a family farm. So we grew up growing corn and soybeans and a few cows and pigs, and it's really working with my hands. I didn't realize at the time how entrepreneurial the family farm really is, right? You're the CEO, the CFO, the COO. So kind of, I remember Dad and Grandpa talking about grain prices in Brazil and droughts in Russia and kind of consumption in the Middle East or in China or in these other places that actually impacted. Do you sell corn? Do you hold it? Do you do wheat? Do you do soybeans? And so these were just normal conversations growing up. That was very much a part of having that small business and entrepreneurial mindset. When I was in like 5th or 6th grade, Dad bought 2 pigs and said, "Hey Toby, if you pay for the vet bills and you're willing to do all the chores, then we'll basically split the profits." Which is like, well, I'm going to do chores anyway. I might as well. And then I started throwing hay when I was in junior high. I had my own straw business when I was in high school. So it was always very entrepreneurial. Always had a side hustle, always was doing something. So engineering undergraduate, so went to Kansas State University, engineering, fell in love with software. Coming out of engineering school, started with Accenture, so kind of a large kind of international consulting group. You really learned how to think on your feet, how to ask questions, how to use technology to solve problems. Went from there to a smaller consulting firm, then eventually did a lateral over to a small startup. As small, there were 50 people when I joined them, so they weren't super small. Venture funded down in Houston, Texas. So I got married after school. My wife wanted to go to law school, so we're down in Houston, and wanted to see what it was like to have to basically own a product over a long period of time. Right, so consulting, you come in, you solve the problem, and then you move on, right? And so it's hard to really understand what would it look like to build a product, live with it for 6 months to a year, add on to it, have to support the legacy product, but really be able to build a little bit more deeply. I also wanted to see what does product management and product marketing look like. So I took a lateral to a product marketing and management role in a venture-funded startup. 6 months after I got there, they fired the VP of engineering and said, "Hey, Toby, you've managed engineering teams before. The tech teams really likes you. Could you manage this team until we find a replacement?" And they never found a replacement. So I remember at the ripe age of 26, I was managing probably 20, 25 people, vast majority older than I was. And I just kind of jumped in and figured it out as I went. All right. So during the day, it was kind of trial by fire and a lot of high trust environment. At home, I'm looking up all these strange words and these concepts that everybody's talking about. And so just kind of hustling at night, trying to just barely keep up. And I did. Not only did I enjoy it, I was fairly good at it. And so that's really where I got bit by the startup bug. When I was in junior high and high school, I would not have called myself kind of an entrepreneur. That just wasn't a title that we really used back then. But really, all my life, I've been fairly entrepreneurial. Came back to Kansas City in 2003, started my first company around logistics and supply chain. So we put a camera on top of a forklift. So they have forklifts running around big warehouses, moving pallets of goods. So we put a camera on top of the truck and we put a 2D barcode in the ceiling and had our own indoor GPS system. And then we had cameras and RFID readers in the front of the truck. So we knew what we picked up, what we put down. And so it was inventory accuracy and operational efficiency play. That was acquired by a private equity in 2009. And we did a roll up. So we acquired 2 more companies in that space, kind of integrated those into a larger company. End of 2011, I transitioned out of that. Was fascinated by computer vision. In fact, even today, I'm fascinated by machine vision, computer vision, what we can do with that space. Was asking around, just networking of, hey, who's doing something interesting with computer vision? And someone pointed me to this professor at a local university that was looking at the blood vessels and the whites of your eyes and using that as a biometric. I'm like, that's a little strange, but kind of cool. So we went and talked to them. And at the time they thought it was, the applications were military, airports, immigration, kind of traditional places where biometrics have been used. What was intriguing about what they were doing was, again, it was pure software. So there was no extra hardware. And it was using what's called visible light imaging. So things that your smartphone camera. So when we started this, I think the iPhone 4S, maybe the 5, was the first time we had a selfie camera on a phone. And at the same time, I'd been working with mobile for a number of years at that point. And I'm like, how about we think about doing password replacement instead of this kind of biometrics in military and immigration? What if password replacement on smartphones? And can we transform a picture of your eye into a key that replaced passwords? Like, that would be cool. So we launched EyeVerify back in 2012. Ended up raising a couple of rounds of funding. Some of them local. We ended up with Sprint as an investor. Wells Fargo was an investor. We had Samsung. Samsung Ventures was an investor. So a number of both venture capital and strategics. And it was a crazy and wild ride. Both of my companies, we've had, been a week or two out of cash. We've had people sue us. We've had patent trolls come after us. So, all the ups and downs that every entrepreneur, will experience at some time or another. Along the way, I was able to participate in a competition called Getting in the Ring. I'm actually going to tell a story in a little bit about Getting in the Ring. I believe the group with 2 nuggets before we jump into questions. But to kind of continue the story, ended up calling on Alipay over in China, so part of Alibaba, as a customer back in, it had been 2015 when we started calling on them. And we were still pretty early. The user experience was good, not great. The accuracy was actually really good. And so we went and pitched Alipay, hey, here's what we've got. This is what we're doing. And at the time, I think they had 300 or 400 million users on Alipay at the time. And it's like, wow, this is really intriguing. We're just starting to look at face. This would work really well, kind of doing face and eye together. So they did a bunch of assessment. In the middle of that, we were raising our Series B financing. They heard we were raising our Series B and said, hey, can we participate in the Series B as well? And I'm like, sure, happy to have that conversation. That's funny. My neighbors are looking in my window in the back if you guys can see them. The joys of working from home. That is hilarious. Anyways, could they participate in the Series B? I said, sure, love to have that conversation. As we were having that conversation, another strategic approached us out of the blue and said, hey, we'd like to acquire you. And we're like, if I can get Alibaba to flip from investment conversation to acquisition conversation, that could be really fun. And that's what we did. So we got these 2 large behemoths into a bidding war, and kind of myself and kind of our investors ended up being a big beneficiary of that. And what was interesting about kind of the Alibaba play wasn't just, it was a great financial outcome, but they really wanted to build a platform, right? They had big vision, big dreams. Was really impressed by them as an organization. And what I pitched to them is, hey, we could make this biometric really service into an identity platform. Right. And so these countries, and you go to India and Indonesia, Philippines, Africa, South America, the first times they're going to come across the need for a biometric or strong authentication is with payments. And if we could flip that experience, that onboarding into an identity platform, you could have a customer the rest of your life. And the executives at Alibaba were like, hey, that's fascinating, but you have to go run it. And I'm like, sounds like fun. What's the goal? I said 2 billion users. 2 billion. Okay, sure. And so I joined and really was led biometrics and identity for 2 years for them. So I stood up platforms in India, Indonesia, Philippines, had teams in Beijing, Singapore, San Francisco, Kansas City. By far the hardest leadership job I've ever done. Not just time zones, but culture and approach and just so many different things that we were trying to manage, but enjoyed it, grew a lot, learned a ton, was successful in a bunch of different ways. They asked me to join the investment team. So then I got to join corporate venture capital. So I got to sit on the venture capital side of the table. Enjoyed that, spent a lot of time in Israel and San Francisco and kind of other places around the US. Unfortunately, right now, doing an investment on behalf of a Chinese company in the United States is not such an easy thing, both politically and media. Things just get roasted. So I was like, hey guys, I can't really be successful. I'm not really adding value. Love the vision, but I need to move on. So very amicable departure from them last summer. Took a little bit of time off. And so now looking at a couple of other entrepreneurial things that I can jump into. Right. So I'll leave you kind of with two thoughts of kind of, things that I've learned along the way, or if I were to kind of pass on a little bit of wisdom. The first one, I could use a number of examples. I'll actually use Get in the Ring as the example. So the Get in the Ring, it's big competition. You get in, you're kind of pitching your company. You've got all these judges. It's both kind of there's a national competition and then an international competition. So we won the U.S. competition, which was awesome. It was fun. The city was all excited. Then on a plane, I'm going to Amsterdam. Then we're competing in the international competition. Ended up winning the international Get in the Ring. And of course, everyone's super excited. The team's excited. The family's excited. The city's excited. What most people didn't know, really outside of my board and my management team, is we had less than a month of cash left in the company. Right. So we've been trying to raise money. It was super hard, really struggling. And so on one hand, we're getting all this great press. Wow, look how good you're doing. And wow, that's such a great story. And we had a bunch of banks that were up and running at that time. We had Wells Fargo as a customer. I mean, we were hitting it on a lot of different pieces. We were doing really well. Unfortunately, we also out of cash. And to be able to kind of look at that, it felt kind of like a fake. Right. On one hand, everyone's saying, wow, look how great you guys are doing. On the other hand, is like, man, if you only knew what was happening on the backstage of this production, you wouldn't say that. Right. And so a trap that we often run into as entrepreneurs is we compare our backstage to other people's front stage. Right. And so when you look at other people's front stage, you think about a play, like a musical or a production. Man, that stage looks amazing. Things are on cue. They happen just like they should. People show up on time. They've got these lines. It's all choreographed. And you're like, wow, that's a production. But then you look at your backstage and it is a complete wreck, right? Well, the good and bad news is everybody's backstage is a complete wreck. And if you spend all of your time trying to compare your backstage to other people's front stage, it'll never work, right? So having a group of people that you can really dive in with and be honest about what is your backstage, what's going on, being able to have a board that you don't have to hide from. You can really have a great board that can kind of look at that messy backstage and have been in and understand the dichotomy of what it's like to run a company. But being able to differentiate front stages and back stages and not getting caught in that comparison loop, because it'll kill you, it'll eat you alive. The other story or nugget that I would leave is really thinking about where you get your identity. So when I was in my first company, we were just starting to grow, really hitting some metrics, hitting our stride. I'd just raised some money about 9 months before. We were burning through that, but hitting all the metrics that we said. In fact, we were ahead of schedule of what we thought we would be going to be able to do, but we're running out of cash. So I'd gone to the bank and said, hey, I've got these big accounts receivable. We're doing these big projects. It was for really, really big name companies like John Deere and Chevron and Boeing and Cessna, big name companies. And the bank says, oh yeah, great. We can finance those, no problem. And a month went by and another month went by. And I'm like, hey guys, you said this was going to be fine. How's it going? Oh yeah, we're working on it. We're almost there. So then it's starting to get pretty tight. We're now down to 3 weeks of cash left in the company. I'm like, dude, what's the word? What's going on? And they're like, well, we can't do the loan. Like, what do you mean you can't do the loan? We've been talking about this for like 5 months. Like, you've seen my financials. We're ahead of schedule. We're doing everything we said. And they're like, bank was like, yeah, we're really sorry. We just can't do it. It's too high risk. I'm like, but you could have told me that like 5 months ago. And so my mind is just spinning because I haven't told my board. I haven't told my investors because I thought I had the financing lined up, or I thought I had it all figured out. I was naive. I was green. Again, in that company as well, we were winning a lot of awards. We were getting a lot of press. And so again, everybody thought we were doing really well. And I felt like my kind of immaturity and naivety was about ready to blow the whole company up because I didn't have the financing part figured out. So I called up one of my best friends, Tracy, and told Tracy the story of, hey, what's going on? I think it's all going to go blow up. I can't see a way out of this. And he said, hey, come on over. Let's have a beer. So went over to his house, sat down on his back deck. And what he didn't do was ask me 20 questions about how to get more money, right? It wasn't, have you thought about this or is this? He's like, he really brought me back to what were the things that were important to me, right? So the questions that he asked me is like, so Toby, if this whole thing blows up and it goes to zero, do you think I'll still be your friend? I'm like, yeah. Do you think the friends that you respect will still respect you? Yeah. Like, do you think your wife's still going to love you? Yeah. Like, does God still have a plan? Yeah. Like, then why are you so afraid? Right. And it really shook me. It really made me take a step back and like, it's right. Like if these are the things that are the most important, the things that really define me, that I care about, like, why am I so afraid? And what I realized is my identity had gotten so wrapped up in the success or failure of the company that I couldn't differentiate the two. I couldn't differentiate who was me and what was the company. And so when the company was doing great, like I felt great. But when the company was doing bad, when the company was on the brink of failure, I was about to be a failure, right? And as humans, we don't like the idea of dying, right? So death isn't a good thing. And so we do everything we can. And as I've continued to be in this entrepreneur world, I've seen people really come off the rails when they're facing that, that I'm about to die scenario, and they have gotten themselves so intertwined, their ego and their identity is so wrapped up in the company that they start doing some things that would have been unthinkable just, months or quarters ahead of that. Right. So they become very different people because it's a fight or flight and they'll do anything to stay alive. And so if you can really take a step back and say, hey, this thing that I'm working on, it's a project, it's a thing, and it'll suck if it fails. I'll be embarrassed. I'll be angry. I'll be hurt. I'll be lots of emotions that will come from that. But me as a person isn't any different. Right. And when I was able to learn that, and honestly, I've had to learn that multiple times over the years because I can be a little bit bullheaded sometimes and thick. Is that it allows me to actually dream a lot bigger, right? Because I can dream really, really, really big, far bigger than my own identity or kind of self-perception would allow. And if that thing fails, it's not me. It's this thing that I'm working on. So really separate what you're doing. That doesn't mean you're less passionate about it. It doesn't mean you don't care, but it isn't who you are. And that actually allows you to dream bigger, push harder, even fail more often, because if the thing fails, you are not a failure. It's just that little thing happened to fail, and great, try again, do something different, either iterate on that idea or go just try something else differently. So the two nuggets I'd want to leave you with, again, don't compare your backstage with other people's front stage, and know where you get your identity, and it's not your company. So yeah, let's open it up, kind of questions, as I do these kind of AMAs, you're on the hook for asking good questions. If I'm not comfortable, I don't want to answer, I'm simply going to say, hey, I don't feel comfortable asking that. But really everything's open and on the table, kind of ask whatever you'd like.
Okay, cool. Thanks for sharing that, Toby. Really insightful. Not only the two big nuggets that you gave us, who really, I think...
Say hi to Hunter here. This is Hunter. This is my teenage son. We're also doing, obviously, school from home. So
so are we.
School from
cool.
home.
Is he going to be an entrepreneur too?
He thinks he should, yes.
Okay, you should send him over. But thanks for sharing your insights, and I think that a lot of the students and the entrepreneurs will relate to it, because of course there's a lot of doubt and fear, and both of your nuggets address that part. So it's really interesting, not being your own company, so the identity. On the one hand, you need to be willing to give yourself for the company. We have some discussions with some entrepreneurs who want to start fashion brands, and if they are too much orchestrating it from further away, they can't load the brand at the same time. So you somewhat become the company first, But your point on not taking on the identity and it makes you fear failure is when it goes too far, right? It's a balancing act.
Yep.
It has to have a part of you as well.
Yeah, you have to be passionate about it. Like if there's no passion, there's no way it works, right? And so entrepreneurs have this, really they're a strange blend on so many ways. They're super confident, they're very aggressive, but they also have to be coachable, right? And so one of the best, I've heard an analogy of like really high performance athletes understand that they are amazing athletes, but if they don't have a coach, nothing's going to happen, right? Or they'll never reach their peak if they don't have a coach. Right. So you have to be simultaneously very confident and aggressive and coachable.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. And then also the part about differentiating and the comparing of your backstage with another person's front stage, especially now how easy it is to bring something online and get the perception that something is big, and especially when you're in the situation where you're trying to come up with a business concept, and then you find a competitor that's already doing what you had in mind. I see that a lot of people are looking at other companies and, oh, they're so great and they're already doing what I have in mind. And then we have them check chambers of commerce and getting financial statements to see. And even if they are doing well, then it only proves that there's a market. So, making that distinction is cool.
Yeah, my first company, I remember when there was a particular company that we would compete with a lot. And they were good at marketing. I mean, they were really good at marketing. And they would send out a press release. I swear it was like every other week or every month, they'd be sending out a press release of all the great things that they're doing and all these customer wins. And I would be like, man, what are we doing wrong? Like, how can they be doing all that? And then I'd go to this conference and I'd start talking to a lot of the other industry players. And they're like, oh, no. It's all BS. Here's really what's going on. And there's like, holy smokes. Like I thought we were so far behind because of the marketing message they were able to push out. And again, I'm comparing their front stage to our company's backstage. It's very different, right? So yeah, be careful not to get succumbed to the marketing prowess of other companies.
Yeah, cool. I'm looking at the questions, and one of the Pablo asked a question about one of the mistakes that you wish you could have avoided. Are there mistakes that you've made in the past that we could learn from, that you would now, second time around or third or fourth time around, would prevent making?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of reflect back again. First company, really good board. So one of the things I've done well is I've always had really good board of directors and have really pushed and challenged me and encouraged me at the right places. But I was going into a board meeting and we were talking about some of the big wins that we'd been having, right? And so I think the particular one might have been Chevron. Like, so Chevron Texaco, massive oil and gas company. And we were competing against IBM and Deloitte and maybe another big consulting company. And they chose us. And like, we were super excited, but I was kind of like, man, how do we keep winning against all these companies? And it was kind of like, I didn't understand it. And the board member was like, so Toby, we're going to know that you're growing up and maturing when you stop being surprised that you can win. I'm like, that's true. Like, I'm surprised. I should expect to win. Why am I expecting that we wouldn't win? And so I think oftentimes, especially first-time entrepreneurs, we're sometimes surprised when we win and we don't take big enough bets and iterate quickly enough, right? So being able to kind of cast a big vision, be super aggressive, iterate, fail fast, move fast, the ability to have that resilience is really, really, really powerful. So I would say one of the mistakes early on was that I didn't take big enough risks fast enough and be willing to fail small and quickly learn and continue to iterate forward from that. The other thing that I think I've done fairly well, but again, I wish I could have always done better, is understanding the importance of relationships and the personal network, right? So being able to just invest and engage and kind of give first, even when there may not be a specific return that you're going to be able to reward, right? So I'm going to go help this person. I have no reason to think that I'm going to get anything in return. But just being engaging and helpful and valuing the people, not because of what they can do for you, but valuing because they're people. And those relationships have come back to really bless and accelerate me in ways that I could have never imagined. So Yeah, never underestimate the power of the person beside you.
Cool. So get help. And also, do you also look at your own leadership style and then people that your team that you build around it to optimize and compensate for your own lags? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, not even just your own team for sure, but even out in the network, right? So to learn how to be authentic and build trust very quickly, both your own team, with your customers, with your investors, with just everybody. Because if business moves at the speed of relationships, and relationships move at the speed of trust. As you can build trusted relationships across the world, quite literally, the business moves so much faster. But you're never going to know where you need an introduction. You're never going to know when you start talking to a customer or an investor or even an employee, somebody you're trying to hire. They have a network and they're going to go ask around, and their reference checks are going to be so powerful. And so to be able to have those positive references, but again, you never know who they're going to be, right? And so it's one of these things, you can't be fake about it, because again, people in the sense of when you're simply trying to build relationships for the sake of relationships, you're not just being genuine, but being authentic, being vulnerable, sharing your backstage, being helpful to others in all contexts, just comes back to be incredibly helpful in so many different ways. And a lot of times you don't even, oftentimes you won't know. Every once in a while you get a little bit of a glimpse of, you're talking to an employee, you're trying to recruit this great technical talent or a new executive. And after they hire on, you're like, yeah, one of the things that was really important for me is I talked to these 3 other people. They all said they knew you and spoke very highly of you. And that was just very important to me, right? And so you don't build those relationships because someday someone might ask for a reference. Again, if you've got that genuine disposition, super powerful.
Yeah. Interesting. Also connects really well with what you said previously with the or not connects, but it's you talked about the front stage, backstage, and how do you determine when to let someone look at your backstage? How do you make the distinction? Because that's difficult, right? Especially when our students, they are still young, they're still trying to create a business, they have no big track records yet. I always see them challenging. Do I introduce myself as a student to get the benefit of the doubt because I'm a student? On the other hand, I want to be taken serious because I'm fully passionate, wholehearted into this idea, and I want to be taken serious because I'm not just an average student. I'm an entrepreneur. How do you balance that?
That is a good question. So I think being genuine is the first part. So being authentic and genuine. So don't be somebody you're not, but that doesn't mean you're gonna kind of, one of my VP of sales is called spilling your candy in the lobby, right? So you don't want to come in if you got this bowl of candy. The goal is you don't want to just spill your candy in the lobby, right? You got to understand kind of how to build relationships. So I think having a group of people, again, even the students here in your class, being authentic and real with each other and really sharing a lot of those backstages is super important. When it comes to customers, there's still a sense of genuineness. So that, again, the older I've gotten and the more I've worked with, people know you're a startup. People know you're young. I don't pretend like you're not, but don't highlight it either, right? You're passionate, you're smart, you're aggressive, you're entrepreneurial. Those are the things, the hustle. I mean, they want to see hustle. They want to see a genuineness. If they feel like you're trying to be something you're not, that is not a way to build trust, right? But at the same time, you don't walk into a meeting with a customer and say, oh, look, here's my financials. We're out of money in 3 months. You want to do business with me? That doesn't work either. So you're right. It takes a little bit of emotional intelligence. But I think, again, everyone can, begin to see, are you being genuine? Are you being authentic? Don't be fake in those relationships. So you've got, again, circles of friends where you're able to share that backstage in a more authentic way. And then with customers, a thing that I've seen both, I've been guilty of myself, and I sit on a bunch of boards and I see others, is, you're typically overcommitting, right? And so you want to overcommit and please and say, oh, sure, we can do this and we can do this and we can do this. Being thoughtful, right? So I've overcommitted tons of times. As entrepreneurs, we all overcommit and overpromise. But I've always tried to have also a thread of just honesty and authenticity of, hey, we're going to go do this. I want to be honest. We haven't done these 2 or 3 things before. Pretty confident we can get there. but not overplaying that, right? So I see entrepreneurs, again, they kind of, it's not just overstating what they're doing, it's flat out lies, right? And that's where you really start to get into trouble.
Yeah, one of your parts of your story was Alipay, and that in 2015 you approached them, you got connected for the even though the user interface wasn't great. How did you convince them to take you guys as a startup seriously? Did you have plenty of track record already, or with regards to what you just said previously?
Yeah, so we did have some track records. We already had a number of banks up and running. The one that really helped was Wells Fargo, right? Global, well-known. So going into Alipay, what we had to do was convince them that our accuracy was 10x better than Face, and it was. The user experience was not as good as Face. However, cameras are getting better every year, and we could implement technology that would make the user experience better. So we had to pitch on what we can make better. Face recognition back in the time, so this was back in 2015, so 5 years ago, face recognition was not very good, was not very accurate. We had extremely good accuracy, right? And if we could prove we are fundamentally more accurate than Face, we can work on the user experience and make it better and do things to work on that. But it's really hard to make something that is fundamentally not more accurate, right? And so really what we did was we played to our strength and said, we've got literally 10x the accuracy by looking at the blood vessels and the whites of your eye, and why the eye is important and why it's unique and all these features. We had, I think, 15 or 16 patents around the use of the eye and the biometrics and kind of a whole bunch of stuff that really gave a really nice protection. So it was a pitch of, we've got something really unique that if we work with you, you're going to be able to come to market with a better product, a better service. We'll continue to work with you on that user experience. And that story played, right? So it's a little bit of, we had to convince them on our uniqueness, and a bit of like, we know we don't have this yet. We'll get better. Will you start working with us? It was risky though, because Alipay, and we knew this going in, kind of advice that we've been given, they don't like to experiment with R&D. They want to go execute. And they're really good at deploy, really everything customer facing. So the teams that we were working with, they weren't R&D teams. They were implementing technologies. And so if your technology is ready to implement, they'll do it at massive scale. But they didn't like to tinker around with R&D projects. And so we knew we were early. But I actually saw Jack Ma up on stage in 2015, starting to talk about face recognition. And I'm like, guys, if we don't get there now, we're going to be too far behind the curve. They're going to be too ingrained with face recognition that our message isn't going to play very well. So being able to say, guys, we've got to get in now, we've got to play our strength and be honest about what we're not today and how we'll be able to get better, especially if they're going to be an investor in a customer.
Yeah, you had a big vision back then when you presented to Alipay. For that purpose, I think they also bought the company later. They turned, as you said, from investor to buyer. But I'm using facial recognition at the moment. Mm-hmm. Did someone overtake, or was it the fact that you have some patents that prevented others from using it? What happened? Or are we actually using eye recognition, and are they calling it facial recognition?
That's a great question. So back in the day, so in 2015, facial recognition wasn't very good. Today, we are astounded at how good face recognition has gotten. And it's all data. Like, so if there's, it's machine learning. And if you get enough data and get enough training sets and enough models, it actually has gotten very, very good. So if you're using the iPhone, it's face recognition with special hardware. It's not just using the selfie camera. In fact, it's not using the selfie camera at all. It's infrared lights, especially. So what we said was we're a pure software play. So you can have an Android phone, iOS, you can have Microsoft, you can have whatever you want. Samsung has, it's called Tizen, it's their own operating system. Huawei now has their own operating system. So we didn't care what the operating system was, and we didn't care what we didn't need special hardware. So face recognition with no extra hardware is still a little bit hard. It's gotten a lot better. So around the eye recognition, we did have all the patents around, the relevant patents that we needed around eye recognition. And the idea was, if you're capturing the eyes, you capture the face at the same time, right? So being able to kind of enhance both of them it's funny right now, it's getting used a lot more with all the masks because face recognition is falling over because people are wearing just the mask on the lower half of the face. So again, if you're using kind of some of the Alipay or Alibaba technology, it's likely a fusion of both. If it's a Apple phone or something native, they've got special hardware.
When you sold the company, did you sell on the promise of the technology, what it could entail, or was it a valuation that was based on the current situation? Because one of the questions from Felix is that how do you identify the right moment to sell? And if you look at the technology back then and when you sold and where it's now, where it now is at, you could say that you sold at the right time.
We definitely sold at the right time. Man, that is far more art than it is science, right? There isn't a formula that I'll be able to give you. So a lot of it is the entrepreneur. They've got it. If they're in the market, they're seeing where things are at. And, so for us, it was still hard to raise money. It never got easy. In fact, I don't think it's ever easy to raise money. And so what we saw was an opportunity. We got, initially, again, Alibaba was looking at an investment, which would have been a great investment. What we were able to do is when we had a competitive offer from a very legitimate, large strategic buyer, at that point, Alibaba was like, if I don't pick this up now, then it might be gone to me forever, which probably would have been true. They would not have been able to buy it after that. And so it kind of forced them to move quicker than they would have, right? So if there wasn't a forcing function of a competitive bid, then they would not have bought us at that time, right? There's no reason to. They would have just, hey, we can date. Why do we need to get married? Let's just date for a while. What they bought was the technology was really good. It wasn't our revenues, and it wasn't our user base, right? If you have to know who your buyer is. Sometimes buyers are buying revenue. Sometimes they're buying a customer base, a geography. Sometimes they're buying just a competitive differentiation. Sometimes they're buying a team, right? Alibaba didn't need our revenue. Like their revenues are so massive. They didn't need our customer base. What they needed was this core technology that kind of gave them a pretty big step up over their competitors. And honestly, a big piece was the vision that we pitched of, hey, we can take this piece of technology, combine it with face, integrate voice, integrate behavioral, a lot of these other pieces, and build an identity platform that is one of the few services that you can say everybody in the world will eventually need a digital identity, right? So as soon as you start doing anything online, you have to have a username and password. That's a digital identity. And so a bit of it was, I'm pretty good salesman. I pitched a convincing vision with a differentiated technology that where we would step in and kind of be that platform that they could build around.
One of the questions in the chat is from Kimberly also. How do you decide which and who to work with? What values are then? What values are then important to you? So who do you decide to work with and what values are then important to you?
Well, and again, there's probably 3 or 4 different facets that you could look at that from. So who do I work with from employees? Who do I want as investors? Who do I want from a customer? Who would I want to be acquired by? I mean, all those to a different degree come down to how well can I trust them and work with them? Of those, investors are one of the most important that we don't take enough time to do diligence around the relationship side. The only person in your company that can't be fired usually is your investor, right? So it's kind of what do you mean? The CEO oftentimes can be replaced. Your employees can be replaced. You can fire customers. You can fire almost everybody in your company except the investor. Because once they buy a piece of the company, they've got a piece of the company and you can't get rid of them. So one of the mistakes that a lot of times entrepreneurs make is they don't think deeply enough about, do I want to literally get married to this person as an investor and they're in it for the long haul, the rest of the time? Because if they're, high maintenance, if they don't understand startups, if they're just going to be challenging, if they're a bad actor, if they're going to look for the opportunity to come in and take advantage of you as an entrepreneur and as a company when the time permits, which has happened to me. It's happened to a lot of people right now in the COVID situation. Kind of investors are stepping in, and if you've got some investors that just aren't nice people, they're going to take advantage of it. So for me, it is can I trust them, and have they been trustworthy over a longer period of time? right? And that goes back
How
to
did you, sorry for interrupting, Toby, this is me is interesting because, well, in the Western world, we are being taught that moving technology to China or getting a Chinese investor is almost guaranteeing copying and taking it away from you. That's a perception. I'm not saying it's the truth, but it's a perception. You took your technology to China, to a company that's more about execute instead of R&D and developing. How did you make that decision?
It's a great question. So we thought long and hard about that. And, you know, the challenge, especially with Chinese, are 1.4 billion people. They're not all the same, as you can imagine. There are companies absolutely that would, you know, rob you blind, would copy what you've got, would, and not think twice about it. And then there's some that are really good, right? Just like any country, you're going to have companies that are better to work with than others. So the strategy that we took going into China was we needed a big brother, because it's unlikely that we're going to really be able to know the difference between a bad actor and a good actor. But if we had a big brother that we trusted, that we felt would, again, be on the up and up, would look after us, and if something bad kind of came up they had to address, then they would do that on our behalf. So that was the strategy that we used kind of going into working in China. We had a really good experience. We've never had, in fact, we had twice people tried to rip off our technology. Neither were from China. One was from South Africa and one was from India. You know, so we were fortunate. I think where that reputation, there's a little bit of a mindset, right? Of what is ripping off, and what is simply, that idea is so simple. How could you have any intellectual property around it? So for example, if I wanted to go build a chair, and I'm gonna go get some 2x4s, a piece of plyboard, and some nails, and I put myself a chair together, I could say, I have some intellectual property in that chair. And somebody else may look at it as like, that's a couple 2x4s and some nails. Like, no, I'm not gonna go buy that from you. I'm just gonna go build that myself. It's a simple chair. And so if they look at the things that are simple and aren't hard, they're like, why would I buy that from you? I'm just gonna go build that. That's so simple, right? And so a piece of it is, that's a mindset, right? So they're scrappy, they're entrepreneurial, they're used to trying to do things themselves. And so if they can build it themselves, they often do. Now where that crosses the line is, you know, as a country, they have some very onerous IP restrictions. If you had to contribute IP to a local JV, a number of those went sideways. All of a sudden you've got copycats and clones showing up everywhere. You know, 15, 20 years ago, it was really bad. It's not nearly as bad today. But there are still bad actors in what they're doing. When going to China, you got to have a really strong value proposition, because if they can build, they've got tons of tech talent. And by the way, Alibaba now does do a lot of research R&D. The group that we were selling to and working with did not. But it's like any country, you got to be careful. In general, I do caution people when they're going to China, they're going overseas to work, of, hey, who are you working with, and make sure you know who that is and what is your strategy.
Cool. The another question I have in the chat that connects here, because I think that part of what you just answered is the importance also of network, right? And the board and people you can trust, because they also know the market, and they can again connect you with people you could trust moving forward, people you don't know. So building a board is essential, and building a good board that also can help you grow into the future. How do you select the board early stage when you don't have the budget to pay them yet, but you do want them to help you grow and maybe then later be an interesting party to the board member?
Sure. So I think a lot of really good people who want to sit on boards, one, they're really busy. So you're typically going to have to compensate them, but it can be in options, right? And so people who are busy and are worth having on your board, you're probably going to have to come up with some way to compensate them. They also, oftentimes, they want to give back. They don't want to waste their time. The time is the most precious thing that they have. So they've got to be convinced that you as a person have a high likelihood of becoming a successful entrepreneur, right? So they, you know, myself, many others, when we can kind of coach, mentor, and give back to people that we think are going to kind of take our advice and counsel, and they may or may not use it, which is fine, but there's the potential that person can turn out to be something really special. They need to be convinced of that, right? So it's not just, if they're only in it because of, hey, you're going to pay them, it's just a job, right? They're not really passionate. So I'd say finding board members that are passionate about you and about your business, that have that domain knowledge. You're going to have to compensate them some way. And then boards can change, right? So set expectations. They're a 1-year rolling commitment, right? Now, oftentimes investors are board members, and they always get to appoint someone. But being thoughtful about having, I've always had really good boards. They've been really honest. They've kind of know who I am. They're trying to make me a better entrepreneur. They're trying to make the business a better business. Of course, they also want to make money as well. A lot of entrepreneurs think boards are just another boss. You guys are getting to meet all my family today. I've had all 3 kids come in to Isaiah. Again, just it'd be like in the same way of hiring an executive team, right? Really getting to know them. How do they balance you? How do they extend your network? Relationships and network are so powerful. So getting board members that have really broad relationships and networks are super important. And they'll be honest. Having your mom and your brother and your friend from school on your board is a waste of time, right? You need people who are experienced, who are going to be honest, who aren't going to waste your time, and you're not going to waste theirs.
Yeah. Is that, I read that last February, you introduced a venture studio idea. At what stage is that at the moment?
It is. It might be on pause given COVID. So the venture studio model.
What does it entail? Can you explain?
Yeah. So the venture studio model is really, it's almost like a pre-seed fund, right? So pre-seed, so really this is at concept stage. Right? You've got an idea, you don't have a company yet, you haven't raised money, you may have built a little prototype, but you're super, super early. And if we can engage with folks that haven't made all the mistakes yet, they haven't gone out and raised money where they shouldn't have, they've got good docs, they've got an idea that's big enough. So that is, can we find, focus, and accelerate entrepreneurs on their journey? So find is, do we believe this person has the right characteristics, the right attributes, the things that we would look for just as a great entrepreneur, regardless of what they would go do? Do they have those core attributes? In the focus, is the idea big enough to be venture backable? Right? So do we believe this concept, this idea, is the market big enough? Do we think it has, potential? Is the timing right? Is the technology right? Just do we have a pretty good feel? Again, we haven't launched it yet, so we don't know, but we've got a sense that, yep, this seems like a really good idea to go solve a hard problem in the world today. So then the accelerate is really where most of the effort is. Rather than say, hey, here's 25K or 50K, then we'll fund it 500,000 up to $1 million. And say, come be with us, right? We're going to work together, same space, kind of an apprenticeship model. So a lot of it is in, being together in the same office, where it's not, hey, here's a curriculum we're going to go work through. It's, what are you working on today? How can we be helpful? Let's do it together. We're almost like the co-founder. So we'll provide them with all the corporate docs, the employment agreement, the options agreement. Here's your bank account. Here's your payroll. Here's the insurance. Here's all the stuff that you need that's important. But frankly, you don't need to spend a lot of your time worrying about. Go spend 99% of your time with the customer, understand the problem, understand the market, build the product, sell the product, support the product, iterate, get to product market fit as fast as you can, and then go raise a downstream route of institutional venture capital money, typically a seed round. And we think that'll take about 12 to 18 months, right? So be able to say, at that point now, we've funded that first $500,000 to $1 million. We've made sure that as best we can, the person seems solid, the idea seems solid. They haven't made a lot of the early mistakes around giving away too much equity to employees or bringing on, mom and dad as investors. It's a pretty clean company. And then we'll help them get connected to the right investors that we think are most relevant for them in the stage that they're at. And then do that 4 times a year. Right. So I have 4 to 6 companies per year over a 4-year period. We're going to be able to launch 15 companies. It's a little bit different financial model. So typical venture capital uses what's called a 2 and 20. It's a 2% fee with a 20% carry. Those models don't work very well and with smaller numbers, right? So pre-seed companies, that just doesn't seem to work as well. So still looking at doing that right now in the world that we're living in. Getting funders for the venture studio, I might still be able to do, but it's going to be harder. I think we'll have more talent on the market, which is great. I think it'll be harder. Will companies be willing to iterate and try new things, right? It's a tough market. People are constrained. Are they going to be willing to kind of step out and try new products from startups? I think that'll be harder. And then how much downstream funding will there be? So I'm kind of evaluating if that makes sense to push into now, or give myself a year or 2 years on that and do some other things in the interim. So I don't know yet. COVID's impacting.
Well, maybe some of the viewers now in this Ask Me Anything session could be preparing for entering your process or your studio.
Yeah.
Let me check the questions. What do you think is most important about building a good team?
Oh, important again. I would say it is a common vision with complementary skill sets, right? So common vision is everybody passionate about the idea of what you're going to do. They've got complementary in skill sets relationally and technically, right? So, can you have kind of a high trust, high performing team with complementary skill sets? The entire executive team have to be fairly entrepreneurial, right? So it's not just the CEO, especially in these early stages. So everybody's got to be willing to, manage a lot of risk, a lot of unknowns, be able to operate with kind of shifting objectives, on an hourly, daily, weekly basis. So it's not just the CEO, but yeah, can there be a complementary skill set of technical and relational skills with a common vision to go solve a problem?
Okay, so that's so there's on the one hand there's commonalities in the beliefs and the way you operate and the amount of hours and effort you put in, and the entrepreneurial mind. And on the other hand, you are looking for complementary skills so that you can have. If you only work with people that are similar to you, you only extend your capabilities and you create a lack of capabilities. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you got to have some diversity, right? Diversity of thought, diversity of skill set, diversity of relationships. If two people bring pretty similar skill sets, mindset, one of them is not needed and shouldn't be there, right? So getting a bunch of people that look the same, think the same, operate the same, that's not the kind of team that you want. You're wanting a common vision, but complementary skill sets and diverse skill sets.
So if you would have to choose between common values and common vision,
values,
how do they relate? Do you see a relationship between the two?
You have to have common values, right? So if you don't have common values, you're going to get just jacked up really, really bad because things are going to get hard. They're going to go sideways. You really have to have both. You can't have one or the other.
Okay.
Because if you have common values but a different vision, then they're not going to be excited about the work that you're doing. But if they have a common vision, but their values are different, you're going to get misaligned in how to execute against that vision. So it really is, it's kind of that vision execution. So yeah, vision and values have to both be there.
Okay, thanks. Checking on the questions. There was one elaborating question from Leonard on what would we talked about the board members, and he added a question: what would an ideal board look like? How many members would you suggest in the beginning?
Yep, I like a 5-member board. Two of the board members are appointed by the common holders. I think of the founding team. So typically the CEO gets a seat and then they appoint one seat. That doesn't mean someone from your team. In fact, I don't like 2 people from the same team on the board. They can attend, right? So you might have your executive team might attend, but use that as, again, someone who's friendly, but again, experienced that's there. So 10, again, two common. Your investors would typically end up with 2 seats. Now your first round, only give them 1 seat. The second round, that second investor will likely get one of those seats. By the time you get to your third round, that first round investor typically rolls off, right? And that will often continue, right? And so if you're in the seed round, you'll probably stay on for the seed and the A. By the time you get to the B, you're probably rolling off, and then have 1 independent, right?
Because on the one hand, the investors, they want a seat to have control. On the other hand, you as an entrepreneur want smart capital, right? So that you also get the benefit of the knowledge and the network of the investor.
Yep. Yeah. So
that's why you want them in the board, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and they're going to be committed to seeing you succeed, right? They put money in the deal. They've got fun. They've got people they're accountable to. So they want to make sure that you're successful. So yeah, so I like 5-member boards, 2 common, 2 investors, 1 independent.
How do you differ your opportunities and potentials from the dream world? Because you triggered that question probably because you say you had about big dreams and big ambitions.
It is. So I think the difference between entrepreneurs and dreamers are entrepreneurs actually take the leap, right? So if you're just dreaming, that's great. You're a dreamer. Entrepreneurs execute, right? They take those dreams and they start moving them forward. You know, I'll have a lot of ideas. I'm always bouncing ideas off people. Hey, I've been thinking about this. What do you think? And as people start to resonate and respond, I kind of see how they respond. And for me, it's just fun. I've got lots of groups of friends that enjoy doing this, right? So we all kind of do it with each other. And as you start bouncing ideas and you continue to find certain ideas resonate more and more, both with yourself and with others, you begin just to put more and more effort towards those, right? So I think, you know, dreaming is always a part of being an entrepreneur. And eventually you got to kind of buckle down and take one and run with it, or help someone else run with it. Yeah. So the difference between dreamers and entrepreneurs is, you know, entrepreneurs jump off the cliff and start to fly.
Yeah, because the dreaming is also the envisioning, right? So the envisioning a future, seeing something that you've really want to achieve or at least move towards. We talked about big, hairy, audacious goals, yeah. Stuff you can imagine, you would want to create, and then stuff that resonates, you start doing, right? And then, well, that's you call it jumping off a cliff. But if I listen carefully to your story, you're also continuously iterating and experimenting and taking small steps, limiting risk, and then because you're moving forward, you're getting closer, right?
Yeah, it is. And so you've got to always iterate, you know, fail fast, try lots of things. You know, good things happen when you continue to iterate and you know, again, fail fast and fail forward.
Yeah, there's, let's see. How would you describe your character as an entrepreneur now compared to when you started? I hope, yeah, when you started as an entrepreneur, and then also your developments as a human being.
Wow, that's a good question. So, how would I describe my character? You know, one of the things that my wife has reflected to me, and even a number of other friends, is that I'm always the same person no matter where I'm at. Right. So it's not like in this group, I'm going to be one way and then I'm going to join a bunch of other business executives and I'll be a different way. And I'm going to go hang out with my buddies or my neighbors and it'll be different. So I've always been a fairly authentic person. I think that has been kind of consistent as I've gone through. You know, I would say one of the characteristics that is different is kind of growing up on a farm, very small high school, fairly just limited worldview, right? I didn't get to experience a lot. To where I am today is my just appreciation and understanding of kind of how big and dynamic and diverse and beautiful the world is has given me a lot of just confidence of the world is big and scary and beautiful and crazy and you know there are patterns everywhere. So I would say I'm far more confident in a humble way today than I was before. I still sometimes am surprised people actually are interested in what I have to say. And I'm like, well, here's some ideas. Here's what I've experienced. But I've done it enough times and I've seen people really value that I try to step into those places and do that. I feel like I've always had a bit of an altruistic streak. Like I want to do things for the betterment of others, betterment of the world. Understanding how to do that at larger and larger scale. I've got a much better appreciation for how to leverage myself and the resources around me and the resources that I can muster. You know, I feel I'm more called to engage in that more deeply. So I would say many of the characteristics that I had early on are just greatly amplified. I don't know that they're very different. I think they've been far refined and amplified 20 years ago.
Okay, thanks. We also got a question about your new or next BHAG.
The next BHAG, you know what? One of the things that I'm really interested in is just that the power that we can have in our immediate vicinity. Like, so in Kansas City and in this region, you know, I have been successful in business. I've got a lot of great relationships. And, you know, I've got 20, 30 years easily left on kind of my professional career. And there are a lot of older kind of business people in this region that I think are looking for people they can trust to begin handing off projects to begin handing off relationships to begin working with. So for me, honestly, how do I step in and play an outsized role in leading our region? So Kansas City is 2.5 million people, right? So it's not huge, but it's a decent sized city. In the surrounding area, just to be a voice of reason and vision and kind of be able to cast a vision for this region with kind of a global perspective, but really thinking almost more locally. I mean, it's gonna, you know, what kind of impact can a few people who come together, especially the world today, man, is so politicized and just ugly. Kind of the public face and public policy and the media and, you know, I think there's a much better way to lead. I have no desire to ever run for public office, but I think I can kind of engage kind of our city and our state in some meaningful ways.
Cool. Nice. We saw another question pop in too, actually. One would be a parting question. I'm going to leave that one from Marco to the end. But also when you said what you want to do for the state, it also triggered because is that also related to your venture studio idea or not?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm passionate about both. So the idea, you know, I always like finding where's their alignment. And so alignment, I love early stage startups. I enjoy coaching and mentoring. I love building. I've got a lot of experience and a lot of relationships. So to do that in a model, kind of more of an apprenticeship model for startups, it's great for the ecosystem. It's great for me. It's great for the people that are there. Everybody gets to make a lot of money. There's a lot of things that are in great alignment. It also allows us a platform to convene, hey, we want to go look at healthcare for rural America. How do we deliver, you know, healthcare in its various forms to kind of more rural settings, right? And like we could convene a topic on that. Okay, what are the ideas? What are the startups that we could go create? Yes, there's a lot around the Venture Studio platform that coincide with how do I also engage our region geographically.
Can you read the question in the chat from Hamed? It's the four last question based on COVID-19.
Yeah, let me read it real quick. So based on COVID-19 changes, social behavior, and industrial changes, whereabouts should we put focus and see opportunities, and where do you see trends as an experienced entrepreneur? So I've been thinking a lot about this, to be quite honest. So it's going to change lots of things. I mean, I think all industries will get changed somewhat. I think the areas that will get changed in, and this is a little bit, it's somewhat global, but a little bit more of a US perspective. I think healthcare looks pretty different, both telehealth, remote health. We've had a lot of regulations get loosened, and a lot of people are asking the questions like, man, why did we have so many regulations on some of these things? Is it really necessary? It really hampers the speed of innovation, whether it's in drug development or delivery, or kind of the FDA is an old, crusty regulatory body that needs to be shook up, and it has been shook up, and we're like, wow, maybe we can do this a little bit different. So healthcare and delivery, I think, will change quite a bit. Continuing education, right? So universities, high school, online, we'll see a huge shift. There are massive financial changes coming. There's a lot of folks that are concerned how many international students will be returning to college in the fall. In the US, we have a massive international student population that comes, and so how many of them will be coming back? So there's concerns about financial stability. You know, it's the crisis is a huge hit on taxes, and of course, taxes pay for public universities or a piece of public universities. So there's going to be a financial crisis there. People have said, hey, you know what? We can do this online education fairly well. So I think higher ed is going to change quite a bit in how we train and educate. Supply chains are going to be pretty different. You know, for 20, 30 years, we've done a great job at what's called lean supply chain or just-in-time delivery. So just-in-time delivery has really put companies in a really hard spot because now they've had very, very thin supply chains. And so as they now have like, man, I wish I had thicker supply chains, or I wish I had more multi-sourced platforms. So I think you're going to see supply chain strategies change, thicker supply chains, more inventory in warehouses, more localized manufacturing that's more flexible. So being able to flip to kind of what is the need today, or this quarter or this year, because of supply chain or because of other things. So kind of smaller, flexible supply chains that are local or kind of more regional. So for us, that's Canada, US, and Mexico. Financial services, I don't see changed as much. There'll be an impact there. I don't see that one's going to be as big. Travel and leisure, oh my gosh. People have realized they can do a lot more remote and video conference than they had, I think, realized. And so business travel, I think, goes way down. Visas are going to get far more complex. Right? Where have you been? How do we know where you've been? What's the hot spot? The ability to get a visa. And again, I traveled a significant amount over the past 5 years. And with a US passport holder, I could go to almost any country. Even if I had to get a visa, it was a matter of a few days or a few weeks max. I think that changes a lot based on where COVID's traveling, being able to travel we've been. So I think international travel in particular looks pretty different. How we gather, man, there's just so many different areas that are interesting. One of the interesting stat in the US, so obviously Amazon and Walmart have both done very well. Amazon, the traditional kind of online e-retailer. Well, Walmart actually, I think, is going to have benefited even more so because there's a huge population set that had never ordered online before. Most of those were Walmart customers. So in the US, Walmart customers would be more kind of middle class, kind of blue collar worker, kind of not nearly as tech savvy. Well, now they've all realized like, wow, that was actually pretty convenient. And so Walmart has seen a huge rush of their customer base going online, but buying from Walmart, not from Amazon. So again, that kind of e-commerce delivery, man, I don't know where it doesn't change.
Cool. What's your take on funding for e-commerce startups versus tech startups? Should you take the cash to grow faster? Take it's an I, but if you could. So there's a lot of investment on the tech startups, but there's now also companies looking for funding for e-commerce startups.
Yeah, e-commerce, they're going to be tough, to be honest. I mean, you're going to have a really unique value proposition to introduce a new e-commerce play, just because the bigger the companies are, the more they serve. I mean, I saw that in spades with Alibaba, of course, with Amazon. If you've got a niche focus, maybe, but that's going to be tough. A pure e-commerce play. Tech plays that enable e-commerce. I don't know. I think, yeah, starting e-commerce from scratch, unless, again, it's a niche area, is going to be tough.
Yeah. I think the question is more coming from a small startup that has an e-commerce business. So it's not like creating the next Amazon or creating the next Walmart, but it's more coming from a startup. If you are looking to scale your business in e-commerce,
okay,
should you grow it yourself, or should you take cash and grow your business faster?
So I'm not sure I understand the question. So
maybe Paul, can you unmute your mic and address your question?
So my question is, usually tech startups, they raise funds because they don't have cash flow or burn rate for the next 16, 24 months, whatever. So they have to take money from VCs and angel investors to be able to, grow and live. Should an e-commerce business that has cash flow take cash if it can to grow faster, or should it grow slowly and...
Yeah. So the question is, do you kind of grow organically through revenues and profits via e-commerce, take money? Well, there's not a right or wrong answer. I think at times we celebrate the idea of raising money. The goal is not to raise money. The goal is to build great businesses. Mm-hmm. If you need to raise money to build a great business, go raise money. But I think sometimes we think that the objective is to figure out how to go raise money. That's not. It's a necessary evil. both I've been a venture capitalist and I've raised money, and it's, again, a little bit tongue in cheek. It's not necessarily evil, but the goal isn't to raise money. The goal is to build a company as fast as you can and get to scale. And oftentimes you need the speed with which venture capital can provide to get to scale. So if you're able to build revenues and to fund some of that yourself, and you're moving as fast as you can with your own revenues, then great, do that. If you feel like you could grow 3x or 5x faster with funding, you probably should go get funding. To realize it's not a right or wrong. It's just what happens to be your business model and what your needs are. And Thomas, I've got time for one more question, then I've got to jump.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry for that. The last question is the parting question by Marco, which is the question about your parting advice to young entrepreneurs starting right now.
Yeah, I'd say a big one is you're super young, right? And use that as an advantage to try lots of things. You're going to have lots of at-bats. So go all in, try as many things as you can. Look at everything as a learning, a continuing educational experience, right? So think about the startup, think about what you're doing here. These are all educational experiences that are going to make you better. CEOs and entrepreneurs are interesting a lot in that, they're super stubborn and they have to be at times to see their business through. But at the same time, you need people around you, and you need to be willing to say, you know what, this dog's not going to hunt. It's not going to work. Let's shut this down and go do something else, right? Again, that goes back to your business. This single idea is not your identity. It might be a great idea. It might not. Be willing and open to shutting down this particular idea to go find a bigger idea that resonates better, that has better opportunity. So I'd say think of yourself as a professional entrepreneur that is looking for great things. And keep in mind, you're young, you've got a lot of at-bats, and take as many as you can.
Thanks so much. Thanks for sharing and being so open about and when answering the questions. Even sharing your entire family with us. So thanks so much for your openness and joining us in this call. Really looking forward. And if there's anything we from Global School can do for you with help with Venture Studio or any way else, if you're in Amsterdam, come pay us a visit, please. And thanks for sharing your insights and learnings.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much. Ciao, ciao.